People magazine confirmed that Celeste wasn't pregnant.
Nobody's talking about this yet, but the man in charge of prosecuting D4vd just admitted on camera that the public has only seen a fraction of what he's actually got.
Those images of the soiled clothes, they were removed from Celeste's body parts, and it included a tube top, Victoria's Secret's thong panties, as well as Skechers socks and leggings.
Los Angeles County's top prosecutor, District Attorney Nathan Hochman, said it plainly in an exclusive interview with NewsNation's Jesse Weber just days after a judge ruled that David Anthony Burke, the musician known as D4vd, will stand trial for the murder, sexual abuse, and mutilation of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Quick version, if you're new to this case. In September 2025, Celeste's decomposed remains were found inside a Tesla registered to David, abandoned in the Hollywood Hills, split between a cadaver bag and a separate trash bag, roughly 5 months after prosecutors say she was killed. Prosecutors say she was killed the previous April, after an illegal relationship that had gone on for well over a year. David was arrested in April 2026 and pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, sexual abuse of a child, and mutilating human remains. A 5-day preliminary hearing wrapped in July, and the judge ruled there's enough evidence to go to trial. Here's what makes Hochman's comments so strange. Investigators still haven't found the murder weapon.
The prosecution still doesn't have the murder weapon, the alleged murder weapon. So how do prosecutors plan to fill in those gaps? What do they have?
It is a long, languishing death. It's not just a matter of the fact that she was rendered down with sharp instruments. It's a fact that she had a blade stuck through her ribs into her liver, which she would have slowly bled out from over a protracted period of time.
There's no confession on record, and yet he's confident enough to say, on camera, that he's holding evidence back on purpose. In this video, we're covering what the DA said this week, what's actually confirmed from the hearing, and what people online have been theorizing since this case first broke. Some of it is documented fact, some of it is rumor and fan theories. Prosecutors allege David bought chainsaws, an inflatable pool, heavy-duty laundry bags, and what's been described as a burn box, all purchased online under a fake name, all bought in the weeks after Celeste disappeared.
Her DNA found all over David's garage. There were the images of the pool, the blue plastic pool that everyone has heard about, where David allegedly dismembered her body. We heard testimony about how pieces of plastic recovered from the autopsy matched up to missing pieces.
Photos of these items were shown to the jury.
No, so David's DNA was actually found on a garbage bag specifically, but there was also this garbage bag in particular. There were 4 different types of DNA, 2 being male DNA, one of the males being David's.
The medical examiner's testimony was some of the hardest to sit through.
That it typically takes power tools to cut through bone, and the body of Hernandez was dismembered in multiple places at both upper arms, below both thighs, and at the knees.
Celeste's remains weighed just 71 pounds by the time they were recovered.
Celeste weighed 71 pounds when her remains were identified. He actually referred to them as markedly decomposed, and he explained that the condition they were in severely interfered with the autopsy examination.
She still had braces. The examiner, Dr. Grant Ho, testified that her remains showed dismemberment at both upper arms, below both thighs, and at the knees, injuries he said would typically require power tools to inflict. He also noted a missing left eye and liquefaction of the soft tissue, consistent with the level of decomposition. Critically, he identified 2 areas on the torso showing what he described as penetrating wounds compatible with sharp force injury, the closest thing to a documented cause of death presented so far.
There was palpable discomfort in court as graphic autopsy images were shown, especially of her amputated left hand with the left ring and pinky fingers amputated. The doctor noted a missing left eye and liquidation of soft tissue, along with 2 areas on the decomposed torso, which appears to be penetrating wounds compatible with sharp force injury.
Separately, one hand was found with the ring and pinky fingers amputated. Forensic testing found blood consistent with Celeste's DNA scattered across David's property.
Injuries, and those injuries are, in fact, two sharp force injuries, one of which appears to be consistent with having gone into the liver. And I've commented on this before. I think that people think that if you're stabbed in the abdomen, you're going to die really, really quick.
On a garage mat, a rowing machine, a car charger, a tarp, and hand wipes recovered during a search.
First item was a blood stain that was found in the Tesla. It did confirm that it was Celeste's DNA, and she said the statistic is 1 septillion times, most likely, Celeste's. That is a 1 followed by 24 zeros.
Investigators also recovered clothing from her remains, including a tube top, underwear, socks, and leggings, which helped confirm her identity and timeline. A garbage bag recovered during the investigation reportedly carried 4 different DNA profiles, 2 of them male, with 1 confirmed to be David's. One especially striking moment. Investigators tested a blue inflatable pool using a luminol test, a chemical spray that makes even invisible traces of blood glow under specific light. According to people who were in the courtroom, when that light went on, the room reportedly gasped. The pool lit up extensively, and separately, forensic testimony found that plastic fragments recovered during the autopsy actually matched pieces missing from that same pool.
No surveillance footage of Celeste arriving at the home. The Uber driver can't say where he dropped Celeste off. No positive blood on the chainsaws. Celeste inviting herself over there instead of being lured. How do you know David watched her bleed out in the home? No statements from David beforehand that he was going to kill Celeste.
Investigators also found 11 separate air fresheners scattered through the Tesla, in the center console, the back seat, and the front trunk, right near where the remains were discovered. Nobody official has confirmed exactly why they were there. That's a detail that speaks for itself.
He, as the evidence has shown, has ordered basically different types of saws, an inflatable pool, the contents of which were found, some of the contents of which were found in her bones when the bones were discovered, cadaver bags. He took trips to Santa Barbara, which is well over probably 100 miles away from his home, the night in which she is last seen.
The digital evidence added its own layer. Cell tower and Tesla location data placed David on 3 separate trips to a remote part of Santa Barbara County in the time after Celeste disappeared.
Is that Celeste Rivas Hernandez shows up at his house on April 23rd, 2025 at night and is never heard from again.
With the detective testifying the tower data was accurate to within roughly 0.8 of a mile, the defense pushed back here too, questioning whether that data actually proves who was driving or who was carrying the phone on those trips. Not just that the trips happened, the defense leaned just as hard on the DNA evidence.
Body is dismembered and found in 2 different bags, a cadaver bag and a black trash bag, in the front trunk of his Tesla.
Their argument, in short, DNA transfers easily, and you often can't pin down exactly when or how it ended up somewhere. Under cross-examination, the defense pressed criminalists on that point until at least one conceded it was possible the evidence got there another way. Not a denial, but enough uncertainty to work with later at trial. Now here's where the case gets legally complicated. Prosecutors allege David's motive wasn't only personal, but financial, that Celeste threatened to expose their relationship, and that exposure could have ended a career worth tens of millions of dollars. Under California law, that's called a special circumstance, and it's part of what makes this case eligible for the death penalty on top of the base murder charge. To support that theory, prosecutors put David's own money manager on the stand. He confirmed there was real money at stake, including that $19 million deal. But he also testified he mostly dealt with David's mother on financial matters, not David directly, and said he didn't know much about Celeste specifically, even though David had reportedly booked her plane tickets to London and Texas. There was also a strange, tense moment that had nothing to do with forensics. A private investigator named Steve Fisher, who'd been looking into the case independently, was removed from the courtroom after prosecutor Beth Silverman raised a concern on the record. He'd previously served as a grand jury witness, which legally barred him from watching other testimony. and she noted he'd also been seen talking with the family's civil attorney in the courthouse lobby. Fisher clarified the attorney had approached him first. The attorney confirmed it himself, calling it a brief 15-second conversation. Fisher left without further incident. Through all of this, multiple reporters in the courtroom described David as strikingly calm. One writer, seated directly behind him for part of the hearing, said he wore glasses and rested his arms on the table, looking almost like a student quietly studying, showing no visible reaction, even while some of the most disturbing evidence in the case was being laid out feet away from him.
We know, for instance, that the reason we can sort of time frame the time that she arrives at the house is we'll know that from the Uber driver. We can also time frame the time that he then calls her cell phone and effectively asks her where she is, or goes ahead and sends a text message to that in that respect, which is about 20 or 22 minutes later. And we know that she is at the house. She's arrived at the house. She never leaves.
At the end of 5 days, the judge ruled there was enough evidence for the case to proceed to trial. Which brings us to this week, and the interview that gave us the clearest picture yet of where this is headed. Hochman was asked directly about gaps the defense had already pointed to: no footage showing Celeste actually arriving at the house, an Uber driver who couldn't confirm exactly where he dropped her off, no positive blood test on the chainsaws themselves, and the plain fact that Celeste came to the house on her own rather than being lured there. The defense has also noted there's no record of David telling anyone beforehand that he planned to kill her, and no 911 call was ever made. Hochman also confirmed something the defense had already previewed during the hearing, and it's worth knowing exactly what it is: the idea that maybe nobody can really say what happened inside that house that night. That Celeste might have hurt herself, or that David acted in self-defense, pointing to messages where she'd allegedly threatened him.
Even if at some point she injured herself or anything like that, at no point does he call 911 or take any steps whatsoever to deal with the fact that she ended up bleeding out that night in his home.
Hochman didn't treat that as a real threat to the case. He said prosecutors don't have to rule out every possible alternative, only prove their version beyond a reasonable doubt, and that circumstantial evidence carries exactly the same legal weight as direct evidence. The jury will be instructed on that themselves. Hochman's answer on the bigger evidence gaps was direct. Yes, there's more, and prosecutors are simply choosing not to show it yet. He explained that a lot of what came out during the hearing was secondhand, detectives summarizing interviews and evidence they'd reviewed. At trial, he said, prosecutors will bring in the actual people those detectives spoke to and lay out the full chain of custody for every piece of physical evidence. He also confirmed something worth sitting with. Investigators still don't have the murder weapon. There's specific talk of a chainsaw that may be missing entirely, possibly discarded somewhere. Hochman wouldn't say more than that all the evidence would be presented to a jury. Asked directly whether there's room for a plea deal, Hochman didn't rule it out, but set a high bar. David and his legal team are free to make an offer. Prosecutors haven't signaled they're pursuing one, and Hochman said clearly that any deal would need to deliver real justice for Celeste's family before they'd even consider it.
So the family is doing as well as you can expect, having lived through this incredible tragedy of initially believing their daughter was just missing, and then finding out that she'd been murdered and her body had been dismembered and stuck in the front of a Tesla.
Now, here's where I want to bring in outside perspective, and I'll say clearly, everything in this section is analysis and opinion, not confirmed fact. Defense attorney Mark Garagos has a genuinely skeptical read on the financial motive theory. In his view, the special circumstance charge isn't really about proving motive. It's a legal maneuver to keep David held without bail, since a case with special circumstances is far harder to get released on. Without it, he argues, David would likely be out on bail, making the case much harder for prosecutors to control. He's called it a prosecutorial gambit and said flatly, this is not by any stretch of the imagination a financial crime. Prosecutors haven't responded to that specific claim, and it remains Garagos's personal theory. Garagos has also floated a legal strategy worth understanding, again as theory. He's pointed to the case of Robert Durst, the real estate heir who admitted to dismembering a body but was ultimately acquitted after arguing self-defense. Garrigo suggests David's team could try something structurally similar, conceding that David concealed and dismembered the body, while arguing he wasn't actually responsible for Celeste's death. He's also noted that some of the medical examiner's language included words like possible rather than definitive conclusions, a detail he believes could face real scrutiny at trial.
Now, Celeste's parents tried to confiscate her phone and stop the relationship, but David actually paid off some of Celeste's classmates to help her get a phone so they could stay in contact. This guy was so desperate that he paid a student $1,000 to get Celeste this phone.
One more theory from retired detective and private investigator Moses Castillo, who's followed this case closely and attended the hearing in person. Castillo has publicly guessed that video evidence of the killing could eventually surface. He's also pointed to something specific from the autopsy photos. The one finger left untouched on Celeste's remains was the one bearing her "shh" tattoo. In his own reading of it, that wasn't an accident. He believes it was left there deliberately, as a message that she'd been silenced for good. Castillo has also said he believes there may be other victims who haven't come forward, connecting it to photos that reportedly showed David with other young women, which he suggests is what made Celeste jealous in the first place. To be clear, none of this has been confirmed by investigators, prosecutors, or anything presented in court. It's one investigator's personal reading of the evidence, nothing more. Now let's get into what people online have been saying, because some of it has actually turned into real news stories, even though none of it is confirmed. Early in the case, before David was even arrested, people started digging through his social media, trying to piece together a timeline of his relationship with Celeste. One popular theory came from a user who claimed they used to follow an anonymous account showing faceless photos of a couple holding hands and having dinner that they'd assumed belonged to David's girlfriend. After Celeste's death became public, the poster began to wonder whether that account had actually been hers. The original poster was careful to say this wasn't an accusation, and nobody has ever confirmed whose account it actually was. A second theory that spread widely online claims David had a separate, close friendship with another woman also named Celeste years before he met Celeste Rivas, and that some fans believe this is somehow connected to his behavior or even his alleged motive. This is entirely unverified speculation, built almost completely on internet sleuthing rather than anything from investigators.
They said that they are actually still investigating David, and they are investigating him with being in relationships with other minors.
What is confirmed, and genuinely strange on its own, David had an unreleased love song with an unfinished title that references someone named Celeste twice in the lyrics. There's also real documented tension involving people close to David. His friend, an influencer named Neo Langston, was actually detained back in January after failing to show up for a scheduled grand jury appearance. He later posted a series of angry messages online criticizing David directly, before eventually saying he was done speaking about the case publicly. And Robert Morgenroth, president of David's touring company, testified before the grand jury, afterward reportedly telling his own lawyer that the prosecutor had been very pushy about why he never called police once he learned what was going on. None of that proves anything about what happened the night Celeste died, but it shows just how many people around David have already been pulled into this case, months before it even reaches trial. So where does this leave us? David has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. His arraignment is set for August 31st, with a trial date possible as early as 60 days after that. He remains held without bail. Both sides are already showing their hand. Prosecutors are building a case on circumstantial evidence, the Santa Barbara trips, purchase records for tools capable of dismemberment, and DNA scattered across multiple points in his home. The defense appears to be building towards something narrower, not necessarily denying what happened to Celeste's body, but arguing prosecutors can't prove David is the one responsible for her death itself. That's the real fight ahead, not whether something horrific happened to a 14-year-old girl. Everyone agrees it did. The question is whether prosecutors can prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, exactly how, and exactly who's responsible for the moment her life ended. We'll be covering every step of this as it moves toward trial. If you want to stay updated, like this video, subscribe to Spotlight Flow, and share it with anyone following this case. Let us know in the comments. After hearing the district attorney's own words this week, do you think prosecutors are sitting on a smoking gun? Or is this case going to come down to evidence that isn't as strong as it sounds?